Hi everyone, I have just filmed a video about my source object type. My source object type is possibly the most important type in my capacity space because it's basically where every note starts. I consume all sorts of media, books, films, articles, Reddit posts, and that teaches me about things. All of my curiosity comes from somewhere, and these source notes are where I capture that. So in this video, I've shown you how to recreate my setup, which includes properties and also various different query sections at the top of my source type. And this is how, as I say, most of my notes begin. So it's a really important part of capacities, not just for my learning, but also my personal journey with my note taking. So I dive into all of that in this video. If you want to see how to get started, then please keep watching. As always, please take what resonates and leave what doesn't. This is a deeply personal setup based on my personal philosophies and what I'm looking for out of my research as a life practice. You might not want or need all of this, but hopefully there's still some tips and tricks in here that you can apply to your own thinking and your own capacity space as well. So let's get started. Let's add this media object type template. We will just edit this because it has a lot of crossover with my real source object type. Of course, has a different name, so I'll just update that. And these are the properties it already comes with. I will show you them first and then we'll add some more. So the most important part of this object type is this property called type. Now I'll open the drop down list so you can see all the different media types that I'm working with. This one source object type prevents me from having to create separate object types for all of these different media types. Whilst there would be some minor differences between them, for example, a book has an author, a film does not, it has a director. Other than that core difference, there really wouldn't be that many different properties. So I don't want to do that setup. I just want to be able to easily choose one type. And there are things I can do with this object type that essentially give me the object type feeling without having to do that. But all of those things depend on this type being filled in. So these are the lists that come with the template. You can obviously remove them or add more if you would like, but essentially whatever type of media you consume, you can just create a label for. In cases like this, where a very core part of how I want to use an object type depends on one property being filled in, I need to be able to quickly find the source objects that do not have that filled in so I can do that. So we will just go back to our source object type and create a query where we're going to filter for where type is empty. I call this add type, and because it's pinned to my dashboard, it's a section here that I can come in and clear as and when I need to. So now that object has that property filled in, it's gone away. But one benefit of having separate types is that you get this place in the left sidebar for you to dive into a particular group of notes. And the same logic would apply here. How do I quickly find all of my book notes? I can do that with a query as well. So add new query where the sources are filtered by if their type includes book. I'll give this a title so we're working with something more specific, but I have all my books there. And what I do is create sections for every type that I use regularly. And in practice, this means I've added them slowly over time. But for the purpose of this video, I will just create the ones that I know I have, which is books, films. So I'm just swapping out what label I'm looking for and renaming the query and then duplicating. So I have books, films, TV series, and articles. Then I can click on that plus and just add all of these sections. So just to summarize where we're at so far, this one source type has a simple property called type, which allows me to use this one object type for all of these different media types, which is much easier to do. In order to make sure that I can find precisely what I want, I can create sections based on the media type, and to make sure that everything is updated properly, I can add this maintenance query to make sure everything is fed. But when it's empty, I know that I will find what I need in the correct sections. So that type property is really important, And the benefit of using queries is once they're set up, they just keep working and they will update themselves automatically, which means you don't have to think about it day to day. Next up is rating. I personally use tags because I've used this setup for longer than we've had labels and capacities. So if you just want to use labels, it will work perfectly fine. You can, but I would like to show you how I set up my tags. So I will go to add property, object select, and link to tag. And I want to just select one rating. So I'll click single, and then you want to open up the settings and choose fixed set. So I can only choose ratings tags, not random other tags I have in my space. And I'm also going to set this visibility to hide when empty because I don't rate everything, only books, films, and TV. So those are the settings done. And with fixed sets, you just want to fill out the set to get started, or you can just do it over time. So to set it up in advance, you would just click on the different ratings you want to see available. And you can see with every click that I'm making, I'm adding that tag to the set. So next time I click on it, it's available for me. And then that's all set up, ready to go. Whether it's in this source or another one, these are the only options that I will see in my drop-down menu. But I don't need it all the time, so it's hidden when empty. This property summary is also hidden when empty because I don't feel like everything needs a summary. So I just put that down there. And in my space, this date property is actually called consumed, which isn't my favourite word, but I'll show you why I do it and talk about dates and capacities at the same time. Any date property in capacities will show up in the date reference section of the central calendar. Now, this central calendar is a place I spend a lot of time, both during the day, because I'm constantly adding to my daily note through my shortcut with WhatsApp on my phone, and I will review it at the end of the day to make sure that I'm thinking about what I need to think about. But I also really enjoy it as a reflection tool. I've been using capacities for just under 3 years, and that means if I go back to any date in the past 3 years, I can see what I was doing because the dates are automatically pulled together into capacities for me. So at some point in the future, if I come back to November the 18th, 2025, I will see that I read Moon Tiger. This is just one single date, and that's what the default setting is for this property here. But if you click on the date you started a book or any source and shift click on the date you ended a book, it turns into a date range. So if I go to the 20th, which falls within that date range, I can see that I was reading or will be reading Moon Tiger. So this adds a layer to my reflection practices where it isn't just about what I read and what was finished on a certain day, what was going on in my life at a certain time. And simply using a date range in this property allows me to see that. It stacks with every other date property I have, which makes it an even more enjoyable reflection experience. So for me, the central calendar in capacities is as much about helping me day to day by holding my daily notes as it helps me with my reflection practices, which I use every day as well, but obviously in a different direction. Now, this isn't the only date property that I have. I also have one called Last Reviewed. I actually have this in most of my object types. I always hide it when empty, but essentially because I've been taking notes for so long now on such a variety of things, I'll often come back to a note a year or two later and obviously have fresh insights on what I'm reading. So when that's the case, if I have a bunch of notes, I will just leave comments in a different colour. My favourite way to do that is just by using the slash command and then picking a colour. So if I no longer agree with something, I'll put it in red like that. Or if I just want to leave a comment, I typically use blue, sometimes purple. It's not really a huge system in place, but I like to differentiate the original notes that I took and then what I came back to take notes on later. When I do this process, it's not particularly regular, but it does happen. I want to know when I did that. So I would use a date property then, meaning when I return to the source, I see when I originally read it and I see when I updated it. And for me, this is part of having a long-term note-taking practice. I expect my opinions to change because that reflects how I'm just constantly learning new things, but I want my notes to know that my opinions have changed. So this is just one way that I deal with it. The next thing isn't a date property, but it's where I use dates, and it's a text property called comment. Comments are also hidden because I don't always have them. For me, it's things like, I enjoyed this much more than I expected to, or I come back a week later and say, I haven't stopped thinking about this particular point in the source. When I add a comment, I always do /now. And my choice of text property here is that it gives me the total flexibility to really do whatever I want, because you can link to other objects in capacities, including the date, which I've done here. And of course, you can also just write. But because this is a time reference, if I open up today's calendar, it's going to be listed in that reference section as well. So it's adding different layers to the dates and capacities, giving me a richer thing to look at again when I come back to my calendar for reflection. I don't think about it anymore, it's just very natural, but for me it's part of the joy of note-taking and using capacities, and that is that constant conversation with my past self and my future self. There's a cool article about that, which I will link in the description. Just while we're talking about timestamps, you can use them anywhere. So you can use /now, /today, /yesterday. I'm always leaving notes like that to myself, and I just know that everything is going to be connected to this date reference section, meaning I will find it again if I need it. But back to the sources. So they're the date and time related aspects of this setup. There's also an icon and a cover image. This comes with the template as standard. And next up is a property that is just for books, and that is whether it's fiction or non-fiction. So I have a label property creatively called fiction, ? And it only has 2 labels, fiction or non-fiction. Of course, this only matters for books, therefore I will hide it when empty. But much like I have a query that finds all of the sources that I have forgotten to add a type to, I need a query to which I can offload the complexity and difficulty in remembering which books I have or haven't assigned a fiction status to. I don't need to remember that, capacities can do it for me. So I will make a new query that returns all sources that are books. So first I need to say, please find me all the books. And then the next filter I want to add is any books that do not have that fiction property filled in. So I want to change it to where fiction is empty. And if I make it a table view, open it in full view here, I will also edit this to just show me what I want to see. Here I can just fill in what type of book it was. And I'll make sure that that is pinned to the dashboard so I can make sure that it's empty. Now, I tend to put my maintenance queries together so that doing one maintenance query reminds me to do the other. And to just rearrange these sections, click on this settings cog, and if you hover, you see the 6 dots that we're used to from blocks in your notes. So I just move these down there. Perhaps expectedly, if I am using a property, it's because it's for a reason. I want to be able to quickly find all my fiction books or my non-fiction. So I don't have to find that manually. I can ask a query to find it for me. So filter where type includes book and where fiction, there must be a better name for that, includes fiction. I will duplicate that for non-fiction books and add that up there. And again, move it so it's a little bit more logical in its order. And now I have all my books. I like to do this grouped by the date that I finished them so I can review everything. If you want to do this as well, just use group by and group by consumed. I always do it by month because it feeds into my monthly review. So let's pretend I read Fluke in October, and now it is sorted in that way, but I want to sort it descending so the things I've read most recently come first. So all of these queries are serving slightly different functions, but all of them are easy to access. And because all of them are pinned here, I also get easy access to them in the sidebar. I want to reiterate here that I have been using the source type since day one of my usage of capacities, but I've added the queries very slowly. So you're seeing all of them now because I know how I use it and I'm sharing that with you. But you'll probably find that you just add queries slowly over time. Basically, whenever you want to find a group of your notes and you think you might want to come back to that group regularly, that's what a query is for. And so all of these sections have come from me thinking, wait, how do I find all of these notes? And then realizing that I want to find them again, and the query will just update behind the scenes for me. We'll spend some time with articles for a second. This one just comes with the object type, but for articles, what I add is a text property called link. This is also hidden when empty because not everything has a link. And the main way that I use this is now with the Readwise integration. So my articles are mapped to the source type in capacities, and I link the summary to the summary and the source URL to the link property. So when things come in from Readwise, they map really nicely. For articles, I also add a published date. I am very interested in what I call essence, which is what was going on around my lifetime. There's actually an excellent quote from Moon Tiger. For me, essence is really about this bit, contemplating myself within my context. And the whole contemplating myself bit is capacities as a whole. Actually, like, everything that's in there means something to me. The date that it was created means something to me on the timeline of my life. These properties let me see what I was doing and reading and thinking, etc. But I also exist within a bigger context, right? So sometimes for articles, I can find them to be really kind of indicative of the times that we live in. So I can make a source like this and say when it was published, so that when I open today's date again, I'm growing that context, not just me, but the world that I live in as well. And again, that's a major part of why I use capacities and a note-taking app at all. And this is how I put that into capacities. And it's literally just the power of a date property and the fact that we have the central calendar. The other properties that I have are all two-way linked properties with other object types. I won't show you all of them because I don't have all of my other object types in this space, but I'll show you a couple and what I mean by that. With non-fiction reading specifically, I am always learning new words, so I like to track which words I learn from where. So I would go to add property, object select, definition, and I call it words I learned, and I go to this two-way linking section and link it to a new property in the definition type, and I hide it when empty. Let me show you how this looks. So this book talks a lot about contingency, which is a word I kind of knew, but not in this context. So when I click on it, I can see my definition. Of course, in my real notes, there are backlinks as well, and I can see where I learned it from. I also change this to say learned from, and I hide that when empty as well. I also create an author property where it's linked to the person type, which I don't have in here. So just for the purpose of this video, I will add the template. If you want to see a deep dive on my person type, let me know. I'll do the same thing and hide when empty. I want this to be a two-way link so that when I click on the author, it's in the left sidebar here rather than in a backlink. So I would edit the property like that and rename it to root. And now that's starting to connect. So I just do this with all the types that I want to, but again, I add them as it comes up rather than all at once. Now that's it for the basic bones of the source and an insight into how I use it. But I also want to show you one final thing, and that is templates. Once again, I didn't add all of these at once. I just add them as I realize I need them. But one of the benefits of shortcuts in capacities is that you can feel like you're creating a new object of a certain type when actually you're just applying a template attached to a different object type. So if I create a template called books, where it will create a new source with the type of book, and then I do Command U, book, enter, that creates a new source and applies that template all at once. You can do that for as many different media types as you think you would regularly use, and then anytime you do Command U, you'll be able to type to find your template. You can also scroll to see what templates you have, such as this one, which is from an old video. And just to show you how these queries work over time, I added this book, which I linked to this quote from Moon Tiger, but I don't have a type for it. So if I open up add type, I can see that. And if I apply a book, but I forget to do the fiction or non-fiction, I click on this and I can fill it out. Then it keeps everything up to date, and it then is where I want to see it and where it's useful to me later. So that's everything for this setup video. If you have any questions about it or want to see a similar video for other types that I have, do let me know in the comments below.